I have 5 devices on me,
Wow.
because I because I'm comparing them. These devices are taking the power from the doctors and the healthcare system and putting it literally into your own hands. What you find out when you measure your heart rate is that the stress comes from many, many other sources that you would never have thought of, or at least that I didn't think of even as a doctor.
Are you surprised by the data?
I was shocked by what I saw because
Dr. Torkil Færø is a GP and emergency physician, documentary filmmaker, author, and photographer. Over a 26-year career as a freelance doctor, he has worked all over Norway, had hundreds of thousands of consultations, and thus gained a unique picture of the diseases that plague us. He learned that the cause is most often found in the stresses our lifestyles place on our bodies. When his father died at 73, he realized that he had to change his own lifestyle. Being 40 pounds overweight, undertrained, overstressed, underslept, and drinking alcohol daily, he learned that this lifestyle could deprive him of decades. Using wearables, he found a way to track and regulate his nervous system and physiology. Welcome, Dr. Torkil Færø. Dr. Torkil, can't we just rely on our bodies instead of wearing trackable wearables, which to those that are only listening, I'm showing right now that I have one on, but I have this dilemma, which is why I want to start here, because I'm a very intuitive person and I believe in listening to my body and my body's needs. But I have this other side that loves to track and measure. So why can't we just listen to our bodies?
because we are not equipped to do that. From nature's side, we are equipped with excellent senses towards outward threats, towards, we have excellent eyesight and hearing and taste and smell, because historically, that is where all the threats to our life and health came from in ancient times. But it's only recently that we get sick from too much stress, from having inflammation in our bodies, and we are not equipped to listen to our bodies. I would not know now whether I have a heart rate of 60 or 80. And that would represent a huge difference in inflammation level. So, and this is how the heart rate monitors can see and monitor our heart rate and find out whether our stress levels is sustainable over time and compatible with health. So it's a substitute for a sense that we never needed to develop. Just as we cannot feel a high blood sugar, we would not feel even a dangerously high blood pressure, because that has never been a problem throughout history. But now this is what is killing us. And this is why we can all, or so many people, get into a burnout situation, a fatigue situation, without them reacting before it's too late. And anybody who starts using the heart rate monitors will be really surprised by what they find, because the sources of stress comes from surprising sources, like the food you eat, like menstrual cycle, like alcohol. Or it's not necessarily surprising that alcohol is stressful, but the degree of how stressful it is shock to most people. So that is why we really need these devices, or many people need them. It may be that you are in the situation where you don't need it, that you are in balance, you are doing the right things. But even for most people that are in this health business, they do meditation, they do breath work, yoga, and so on. So many people contact me, and even they will get surprised by what they find when they start measuring their heart rate.
You said that even now, without the heart rate monitor, you wouldn't know whether your heart rate is at 60 versus 80. How would you adjust your behavior if your heart rate is at 60 versus 80? Why is that important to know that information?
Yeah, because if you see that even in the relaxed state, that your body is stressed, you're starting to look for how can this be? What am I doing or have been doing recently that gives this stress level in my body? And it could be, in my case, it could be eating chili. It could be eating bakery goods with gluten. That could stress me. I used to use a kind of nicotine that we have in Norway, something we put under our lips. That would stress me. And I would have no idea until I started tracking my heart rate. So these are just some of the things that you find. Yeah.
It sounds like you use the word stress and increase your heart rate interchangeably.
Yeah. When your body is stressed, from whatever reason, it may be the week before menstruation, it may be from the alcohol the day before, then your heart rate will respond and get higher. If you do something that really relaxes you, you will see it also in the heart rate, in a good heart rate variability. So it's not the heart rate in itself. What is important is the heart rate variability, the variation between heartbeats that can tell you whether you are in the parasympathetic restful state or in the sympathetic stressful fight, flight, and freeze state, and anywhere in between there. So that is why it's important.
How would you recommend narrowing it down to figure out what is actually causing the stress? Say that you are out at a bakery and you're having some type of muffin or scone with a coffee or tea, and you do have an increase in your heart rate. How can you pinpoint what exactly it is?
Yeah, then you must see, okay, what have I been eating? And then if it's not clear, then maybe you will have to experiment. Maybe a couple of days later, you will try the same meal without, one of the ingredients that you had, and then see if you get the same reaction in that case. For many people, it can be so complicated that you would need a blood test to see what kind of food are you reacting to, because it may be 5 or 10 different foodstuffs that you cannot tolerate. So that would be maybe one of the most common sources of stress. Another source of stress would be that you're eating too late in the evening. So if you're having your last meal, maybe 9 o'clock and going to bed at 10, often the stress level caused by you eating something at a time of day that the digestional system is not really primed for action, that will give you stress way into the night.
I can feel the listeners getting stressed just thinking about having to do this, having to track all this,
Mhm.
just monitor it all, and it can feel overwhelming. Could this actually cause more stress? I've even heard of some people who stopped tracking their sleep because it became more of like a game of looking and seeing, oh, what's my
Mhm.
sleep score? And so then it affected how they slept because all they were thinking about was getting a good sleep score.
Mhm. Yeah, as with anything new, it can be difficult to relate to. But in my experience, most people, maybe 90% of the people, will incorporate it as a normal signal of all the different signals you take in every day from the news and whatever. Something that helps you navigate your stress levels. And maybe 10% would get stressed just like you are saying. Often because they will find out that their stress level is too high and they don't have the tools to detangle what they are seeing. Because my book is actually the first book in the world that explains how to use these wearables to track your physiology. Once you get the keys and you get the guidebook on how to do this, then it becomes, of course, much more easier. But the problem does not go away even if you put away your ring or your watch. The problem of too much stress in your life will still be there. So you're not solving the problem of putting away. This is just a reality check that tells you your level of stress and the intensity in your life compared to your recovery is not sustainable. It will lead to problems.
Would you say this is something you don't need to do long term then? It could be something you do as like a check-in on yourself.
Absolutely. You could, for example, do it the way many people use CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors that you use maybe for a month or two, and then you find out how your body reacts to different foodstuffs when it comes to blood sugar. And here you could also use a Garmin watch or an Oura ring maybe for 3 or 4 months to see where is your stress levels and what affects your stress levels. And then, of course, when you find out how to improve your lifestyle according to what you find, then you can go on without it in case it stresses you. But for most people, it becomes, just like you say, it becomes like a gamification of your own health, where it's your health and life is at stake and not just an avatar in a video game. So most people think it's fun. I would say 9 out of 10 would think it's more interesting to have this window into your system than they would expect. And maybe 10-15% would think it's more of a problem than they would expect. But they often don't even try it, so it's not so common.
Are you surprised by the data? When you started tracking your own numbers and even patients, were you shocked by what you saw, or was it in line with what you would have expected?
I was shocked by what I saw because I'm a calm person and I would expect just to be in the parasympathetic restful state. Because from the medical school, we had learned that the sympathetic state was a fight, flight, and freeze state, and I was never feeling that. I was never scared or in a fight, flight, and freeze mode. So of course, I would expect just to see calm numbers, the parasympathetic state. But I was stressed almost all the time. But that came from what I was eating, from the nicotine that I was using, from alcohol, from sleeping too little, and so on, to be that I wasn't in a good fitness level, that my VO2 max was not good enough. So those kind of things would stress me. And of course, for women, seeing the strain of the PMS period, the week before menstruation, when they see the stress in numbers, it becomes so much easier to mitigate the stress and get relieved of the PMS symptoms that they often can do when they mitigate the stress levels. But I was surprised, yeah. And I was also surprised to see that when I am at the calmest, that is at the ER, when I work at the ER, which I would previously think would be the most stressful just by default. You know, it's at the ER, it must be stress. But that is when I am at the calmest. I'm almost as calm as when I'm sleeping at night.
Wow.
So that means that where I used to think I should limit my sessions at the ER, I don't have to do that. I can work 15 hours, 20 hours. It doesn't really strain me as a trip to the supermarket, instead would be, for example.
Hmm. I wonder if that's gender specific.
Probably, yeah.
Uh,
Uh,
we go on.
Yeah, and we also see that we're also very individual. So what would stress you and your boyfriend or your family would not stress anyone else, So we're all very individual, and we react differently to different stressors. So that is also very interesting when like couples use these monitors at the same time.
You mentioned women's menstrual cycles. Are there
Mm.
other reasons why tracking HRV is particularly important for women?
Yeah, I think women, when it comes to fatigue symptoms, that is primarily women. I would say of people in a burnout situation, 8 out of 10 would be women. So they are much more prone for stress-related diseases. So one thing is the menstrual cycle, and other things they are often taking on emotional stress more than men do. And when you can see the level of stress, you can also reduce the level. It's like having a speedometer to your physiological speed. So just like in your car, you need to see your speed, you need to see how much gas is left on the tank. Maybe you want to see the outside temperature, and so on. So this is a way to get the same numbers on your physiology, because these heart monitors will track your heart rate, it will track your temperature, they will track your movement, how much you're moving, and your oxygen level. So there's so many vital signs that you get the dashboard to, so to speak, on your wrist. And that makes it so much easier to navigate. So because what you can measure, you can manage, right? So that is why so many people, as you're saying, some would be stressed, but most people would quite fast identify what stresses them. And when they are able to remove those stressors or reduce them, they feel better and have more energy and don't waste energy on something that is not helping them living a better life.
There are so many different smartwatches and devices available now. Do you have a favorite, or how would we go about choosing the best one?
Yeah, my favorite is the Garmin watch. That is, or watches. They have a price range from maybe $250 all the way up to probably $10,000, no, $1,000. And they would be the best to micromanage the stress levels. But you could also use things like an Aura ring or a Whoop band or Samsung Galaxy ring. So currently I actually have 5 devices on me, because
Wow.
I because I'm comparing them. If
Okay.
I if I, if I, if I wasn't in my position doing this as a job, I would probably just have one ring and one watch, and maybe the Whoop band. So yeah, so there's a use selection that you can use. So it depends on what you want. If you want a glimpse into the system by having a morning report every day and that's it, or if you want to be able to micromanage your stress levels, find out how much just temperature, what will happen. I just came right now from the sauna and ice bath. So to see how your body responds to cold plunges, for example, is interesting. You wouldn't necessarily be able to see that having the Aura ring because you will just get the report in the morning. And when you only get the report in the morning, it's like going for a huge shopping that you really, for a week, week's shopping of your groceries, and you only get the total on the bill. You don't see the different items. When you have the Garmin watch, it's like seeing the different items. It's like seeing, okay, the stress level was high between 1 and 2 p.m., which is because either I had a meeting with this certain colleague, or I was eating this certain meal, or having that glass of red wine. Then you can identify what what was expensive in this shopping, so to speak. So I would say Garmin is the best one, but there are lots of choices.
I'm curious now how they're comparing. Do they all give you the same numbers, the ones that you're testing?
They would give me a little bit different numbers, but they would fluctuate at the same kind of speed or wave, going through the week and so. But they would also put a different weight on the different numbers that they get. So some would prioritize heart rate variability, some may prioritize your sleep consistency and so on. So you would get a little bit of different numbers. Um, but um, but all of these would be better than just guesswork because we are terrible at guessing our own stress levels, which is why we get all these stress-related diseases. And we reckon now as doctors that 80% of the diseases that we are treating at the doctor's offices and makes people sick, that is stress-related. And stress-related in the broad sense that I'm talking about, including food, alcohol, and so on. Not just mental stress, because when you ask people on the street, are you stressed? They would only think of mental stress. And what you find out when you measure your heart rate is that the stress comes from many, many other sources that you would never have thought of, or at least that I didn't think of even as a doctor.
Like what?
Like food.
Mhm.
I would never have thought that eating 2 big slices of cake would give me stress. Who would have known? Uh, but when you have the heart rate monitor, you can see that, at least for me, the heart rate will go up maybe 10 beats just because of that. And of course, most of the inflammation in our bodies come from the food, from ultra-processed food, from food we're not really made to digest. And we can see that on the heart rate. So if I know, like today, I had a busy day, then I know that if I have a Caesar salad, that is good. That is calming for my system. So you learn these things on the way, and then even at now I'm 55, I feel I have the energy of a 35-year-old, you know. I probably have more energy than I used to have at 35 because I have removed so many other stressors. And when I was 35, you know, with small kids, I used to think that having the family life was a stress, that having small kids and so on. But now, in hindsight, knowing what I find on my monitors, I know it was the 2 glasses of wine at the end of the day and the use of nicotine, and that I was not caring about what I was eating. If I had removed those stress factors, the family life was not the trouble. You know, the kids was not the trouble.
I feel like I've learned the same type of lessons, that it's never external. It's always us, you know, it's always self-inflicted.
Yeah.
I have some lifestyle strategy questions I want to run through with you.
Cool.
The first one is, how can we optimize our sleep using HRV tracking?
That's the most important part, by the way, and the first chapter in my Pulse Cure book, because once you get your sleep in order, you will wake up more refreshed and you will have more energy to do the rest of the choices throughout the day, you know, picking the good food and doing the exercise and so on. So you need the best tips I would have for better quality sleep is to dim the lights in the evening, avoid bright lights, particularly blue light, to have a cool bedroom. I think in Fahrenheit, I think we're talking around 60 degrees Fahrenheit or even lower. That will be better for the recovery. And you will need the bedroom to be really dark, just so you cannot see a hand in front of you. Maybe the most important thing is to go to sleep and wake up at the same time every day, as much as you can, you know, within reason. And this is so important, and that you sleep for 7 to 8 hours, that you make sure that you get at least 7 hours of sleep measured on your monitor, because you may need to be in bed 8 hours to get that 7 hours of sleep, of effective sleep. And earlier, even as a doctor, we didn't know how important sleep was for health. Now we know that if you sleep less than 6 hours compared to more than 7, you double your cancer risk. And me working as a doctor round the clock, even often at busy night shifts, I would know that it is uncomfortable and is painful to work at those hours, but that was downright dangerous and carcinogenic, I had no idea. So you really have to take care of your sleep. That should be your first priority. And also, of course, to have a good night's sleep, you need to not have been eating maybe 3 hours before you go to bed. And certainly you need not to have alcohol in the evening, even to help you sleep. You will fall asleep faster, maybe, but your sleep will be terrible. On my heart rate monitor, I can see that my stress levels at night with 3 glasses of wine is just like having a lecture in front of 200 people for 6 hours. It's the same response to my heart rate because alcohol, or rather acetaldehyde, that alcohol is transformed to by the liver, that is so toxic that it creates this high heart rate and gives you stress and poor night's sleep. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're not refreshed and you're less prone to take the good choices throughout the day.
Would you recommend then avoiding alcohol altogether?
That I think would be the best, certainly. And trying, maybe I drink alcohol maybe 3 times a year. And that is because it's so busy, because the success of this book has just been tremendous. I'm I'm constantly approached by people and media, and everything is still like being in a tornado. So I cannot afford to waste energy on alcohol, detoxifying alcohol. I don't have time for that or energy for that. So it's almost like I would want to. I wouldn't mind having alcohol 10 times a year, but it's not what I can prioritize. So for most people, probably it would be to have that kind of alcohol level.
What are the best ways that we can balance stress throughout the day?
That would be to have small micro breaks, micro intervals where you can breathe slowly and close your eyes and relax, maybe just for 1 minute, 10 times a day, during your, if you're in the office or between two meetings and so on, to be able to use the breath to calm yourself down. That would be the most important thing.
Is there a best time to exercise and how intense should workouts be?
I think for cardio and endurance training, that would be in the morning, and for strength training, that would be in the early afternoon, like 3 p.m. or so. And you should be careful about how much strain you put on yourself and adapt it to your overall stress situation. So, of course, if you have a stressful job, you have small kids, a tight schedule, you may not want to go all out in the gym because you need so much, you may make for too much recovery work to be done. Because when you have a really hard workout with lots of lactic acid, the Garmin watch could maybe give you 80 or 90 hours of recovery time. And that is real because the lactic acid and the strain you put on your system to recover can be really, really hard. And that is so important to see in the heart rate. So most of the time I recommend people, at least okay, if you're an athlete and you need to run at a certain uh, time in a marathon, okay, then you need to push yourself a bit harder. But for most people who train for wellness, they would need to have a recovery time as measured on their Garmin watch of less than 24 hours. Uh, then you're in a good zone, I think. You shouldn't strain yourself more than you can recover from until the next day. So that would be a good measurement, I would say. And on strength work, you shouldn't do hard workouts too late in the evening. So a hard workout you should end before maybe 4 or 5 hours before you go to sleep, ideally. And then you may participate in the sport when the training hour is at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the evening, and you will still prioritize that, but you will be able to see the effect of that, and you would need to take more care the next day to recover.
What about for women during their cycles or before their cycle? Do these guidelines change at all for that?
Yes, so the problem is the week before menstruation. And when you see that your heart rate variability goes down, that you will see then maybe 1 week before, if you have the condition called PMDD, the dysphoric disorder, which is kind of a more serious form of PMS, then the problems may start even 10 or 12 days before menstruation. And then you should maybe do yoga instead, maybe do breath work instead of a hard workout. Pay attention to sleep more than you would otherwise. Of course, alcohol, nutrition, all of these things, because when you have this low heart rate variability because of the PMS, then you feel like having more chocolate. You are tempted to have a glass of wine to comfort yourself. But that will only lead to more stress and further deteriorate the stress. So when you're able to mitigate the stress in this way, then you can see also on your Garmin watch that the stress levels flatten out. So you'll flatten the curve, so to speak, and you will also have much less symptoms. So having PMS symptom is avoidable. It comes because of there's too much stress, and having too much cortisol because of the stress will kind of backfire on the sex hormones and disturb this and give you symptoms. That is the problem.
I've gotten better and better at sticking with my diet around my cycle because, that's also when women will tend to get cravings for things. But as long as I stay on my diet and I do listen to my body and I'll maybe take a nap a couple days before, I won't even know that it's coming. The last time I didn't have a single cramp and I was just amazed because years ago it would have been a painful experience every month. And now I'm learning that it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you have done it by yourself, but also when you see it in the graphs on your phone, then it becomes also much easier to do this. The best thing would be, and that is important because my book, you don't, my editor was really firm that you don't need a watch or a ring to have useful information from the book. You can do all the strategies that are healthy for you, and you can learn from the people who use the heart rate monitors, but you just do the same thing that they do without needing to track it yourself.
Okay, that's great to know. So your book can be very helpful for everyone, even if they're not using a wearable.
Absolutely. The book is most of it, 90% of the book is just the best strategies on sleep, nutrition, exercise, active rest, on alcohol and menstrual cycle, and trying to balance these things, which is the basis of health, hydration and so on. So, and the good thing is that when you do the good things, it becomes visible in the heart rate. But that is kind of secondary. The most important is to do the right things. Whether you can see it on the heart rate monitors and you want the guide and help from the monitors, that is kind of optional.
What was the turning point for you that made you want to take control of your own health?
The turning point was quite swift. It was my father died from cancer at 73. And I took a look in the mirror and I saw that the way that I was, because I was doing everything wrong, everything that I'm writing about, the good advice in my book, I was doing everything wrong. So I was kind of headed for disease myself. And I wasn't really aware of that because we didn't learn so much about it in medical school. We learned how to identify and categorize disease and find the treatment. And we weren't really focused on creating health, which is a whole different ball game. But when I saw my father die at 73 and saw that his sorrow for not being able to see his grandchildren grow up and his own life, of course, then I had to look into what can I do to avoid dying at 73. And then I saw that there was so much information that had just passed me by as a doctor that I needed to do. So I changed my life around. I started exercising. I lost 40 pounds of weight. Started caring about what I was eating, cutting out alcohol, cutting out the nicotine. I was partly smoking and partly using this local thing that we have in Norway, which is nicotine you put on your lip. Um, and generally making sure that I was sleeping more. Yeah, doing the things that we that now, 12 years later, is quite common, on every health related podcast. This is what we are talking about. But 10, 12 years ago, we didn't talk about these things, at least not to my knowledge at the time. So I needed to change my life around, and for the last 6 years, then I've been using the heart rate monitors to help me uh, to do this continue this change and identifying the small things, in everyday life that stresses you.
What's your goal age? How long do you plan to live?
I would really love to be 100 and still being vital. So that is what I aim for. So, and that is what I see as a doctor as well, that you can do that, but then you have to do the right things. And so you either put in some effort into staying healthy, or you will get more effort being sick. And the effort that you do to stay healthy is within your control. It's mostly free or even cheaper than the alternative. But once you get sick, your health is out of your control. You may have contracted a disease for which there are no cure, and you depend on the knowledge of your doctors and the quality of your doctors and practitioners and treatment, and it's much more stressful. So as a doctor, I see that being sick, having 2, 3, 4 diagnoses that many with the inflammation-based diseases have, they don't only have one disease, they often have like a cocktail of 5 different diseases and 10 different medications with all their own side effects, of which we have little control, I must say. So actually, this is a huge shift in the focus in the healthcare system from waiting until you get sick before we do something, which is the current strategy that I'm working under even now as a doctor, and to avoid getting sick by changing your lifestyle, doing different things. And this is all things that we did not learn in medical school. There was very little on nutrition, nothing on sleep, I would say, nothing on exercise, nothing on alcohol or many of the things that we now know. The importance of the microbiota in the gut, was not known. Autophagy was not known, that we ourselves, when we are fasting, starts eating the worst senescent cells first and kind of renovate our system. So there's so much more now we know that can keep us healthy that we didn't know only 15 years ago.
I'm really happy that so many doctors like you are bringing light to this and talking about all these areas that are not taught in medical school, because I've heard it called sick care instead of health care. And I've heard how there's maybe one chapter on nutrition, and it's so sad to know that, but it's also really, really great to see so many people talking about, the things that really support our health.
Yeah, it's a huge shift. And it's also a huge shift in the power. So these devices are taking the power from the doctors and the healthcare system and putting it literally into your own hands so that you have the control yourself. Instead of you going to the doctor, having some blood work done and getting some results that you may not even know what is happening every third month or a half a year or whatever, you get the most important biometrics available at all times on your wrist whenever you want to have control of it. So it's a totally, and also including using artificial intelligence, because of course Whoop and Garmin and Aura, they use artificial intelligence combined with the numbers they get from the device and the big data from millions of users, and can give you a very good estimate of whether your current stress level is compatible with health or not.
I have two closing questions for you, but before I ask them, where can the listeners go to learn more about you, your work, get your book?
Yeah, my book, The Pulse Cure, they can get on Amazon or any outlet, on the internet. It's a standard published book, and it's also an audiobook. So many podcast listeners would rather prefer to listen to a book than read it. It's also an ebook, so it's called The Pulse Cure. So it's available anywhere. Of course, your local bookstore may not have it, but they would be able to send it to you, of course. I have a website called thepulsecure.com, where it's also possible to see I think it's an hour-long lecture, a video lecture where I show what I'm talking about now. And there's a blog in there and so on, and yeah. And I'm on Instagram, Dr. Torkil, dr.torkil. So people could contact me there and see.
Great. The Pulse Cure was the book and the website, and we'll have all of that linked into the description, of course. The first question I have for you is, what is your number one health tip? So that could be diet and nutrition, emotional, spiritual, physical, just the one piece of advice that you would like everyone to know.
That would be to minimize alcohol to the most important. I understand that sometimes there's a wedding, there's a special dinner or something, but to avoid the kind of quote unquote unnecessary glasses of alcohol, that would be the by far most important. And according to Whoop, which takes my bracelet, it's an American bracelet that takes in information from the users, alcohol is the by far worst stressors of all. So it can take 5 days after you've been drinking 3 or 4 glasses of wine or beer until your recovery state is back where it was before you had the drinks.
It's serendipitous that you're saying that to me right now because I haven't drank in several years, but there's always that thought of it might be nice to just try it again and see, touch the hot stove and see if it still burns. But it's a great reminder at how awful it is for our bodies. For the final question, you get to choose a number 1 through 100, and it correlates to a more personal question.
Okay, cool. That would be 99 is a nice number, huh?
99. What's a random act of kindness that made a difference in your life?
To me. That somebody has done to me.
I'll let
That's
you
what you
interpret
mean. Random act of kindness. I think I was making a photography book. I'm also a photographer, and my first published book, I asked a famous photographer if he could write the preface, and it's like, asking Bruce Springsteen, could you, or Taylor Swift, could you do that for me? And he found the time to do that, and I think that meant a lot to me in my career as a photographer that eventually led me to where I am now in healthcare. So I would have that. That is what comes to mind. That was something that he didn't need to do. He could easily have said, I don't have time for that," and he did a great job doing it. And I think it's been important for me ever since.
That's a really sweet story. Thank you so much, Dr. Torkil Færø. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom and everything that you have learned over the years from all of your travels and all of the patients you've cared for, all of the testing that you're doing, even on yourself. I appreciate you coming on, being a guest, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, for having me coming to your show and tell all about the things that I'm passionate about and that I know can help people so much.